This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Shipwrecked and Comatose podcast here on the We Made This podcast network. Before we start into today's episode and the coverage of the film we're about to look into, we wanted to issue a warning to our listeners. This film contains a plot point that reflects recent news in the UK, and we've decided not to discuss this element in the show. If you've already seen the film and are sensitive to this topic, you may want to skip this episode, at least for now. We apologise for any inconvenience that this may cause, but as always, please take care of yourself and each other. Thank you for listening, and now we continue with our episode. Thank you.
Almighty Cloister, please help the Shipwrecked and Comatose guys with their Christmas special. They worked so hard, and it's the 100th episode. I mean, there's been a lot of specials. I mean, there was that Gap of the Triphibian Monster one. I'm not quite sure how we got an hour out of that, and still not sleeping right since we recorded A Prince Among Men Series 1, but still, help them. Help them, Mighty Cloister. Help them this Christmas time. Did you hear a prayer just now?
I think I heard something like that, yes. What is it, Carl?
It appears to be the Shipwrecked and Comatose chappies.
Ah, yes, I've heard of that podcast. About that red dwarf, isn't it?
It is.
Fantastic.
Well, some of it, there's a lot of other episodes about different things as well.
Yeah, about 10% of the episodes appear to be about Red Dwarf. The other ones seem to be that Mark Adams just getting ideas to do specials about pretty much anything.
He loves a special.
Whatever Danny John Jules has had for breakfast that day, for example.
Anyway, they seem to be calling for a bit of help on their podcast for Christmas. I mean, have we got any angels knocking about at all?
I don't think we've got any angels. Will a Series 3000 Mechanoid do?
Oh, I don't know about that. Isn't that Hob chappie available?
I think he's asleep, but yeah, sod it. Hob will do. Let's send Hob down.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cloister.
No problem. Anytime.
Ho, ho, ho. We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello everyone and welcome to It's a Wonderful Life, the podcast all about Fan Capra here on the We Made This podcast network. My name is Kurt North, and joining me for this wonderful, wonderful episode of Shipwrecked and Comatose, the 100th episode, is Mr. Mark Adams. Mr. Mark Adams, we're here.
No
Celebrate.
need to run and hide. It's a wonder. We're doing about the song, right? By Black.
No, we're doing about the film which I've watched and didn't realise I was hosting.
It's a banger, though, that song, innit? And I've listened to that song a lot. This is the first time I've watched It's a Wonderful Life. Also, hello.
Hello.
Merry Christmas. Happy 100.
Happy 100. Also joining me and Mark is Mr. Matt Latham. Matt, how are thee?
Well, gee, sorry, Mr. North. Mr. Latham couldn't make it today, so I'm here in his homestead. So, hi, my name is George.
Fuck's sake.
George, is it George Bailey?
George Bailey, sir. Yes. And before Mark gets all pissy about this, I spent 5 minutes watching a YouTube tutorial on how to speak like Jimmy Stewart. So
I thought you'll be more known as Bailey George.
I've already used that joke once. I don't want to repeat the same mistakes again. You know what I mean?
Merry fucking Christmas. Fuck.
Christmas time, mistletoe and wine, children singing.
Question rhyme.
Maybe not. Not in Mark's household.
No, down at the Bell's End. Well, this has started well. Good. We've done 100 episodes of this absolute tat.
100 episodes, and the idea was to have a massive celebration and happy Christmas, everyone. The massive celebration was meant to have 2 people here, which aren't here, unfortunately. We've heard 2 bells ring, and
yeah, they're dead. They're not dead. No, both Colin and Carl couldn't make it, so we were on a tight schedule, so we had to record without them. We love them, but they're not here.
No, well, sorry, slightly tangent already. One of my favourite moments from the British Office is, I think, during the training day one where he's singing like he sings "Free Love on the Freeway," and then Gareth goes, she's dead, and then David Brent's like, she's not dead. And basically, whenever anything like that comes in, it reminds me of that, and it makes me laugh. It's one of my favourite small moments of that show. So,
but everybody's dead, Matt.
She's not dead.
Not dead.
Dead is dead. Dead is dead.
She's not dead.
Dead is dead.
They're dead. They're not dead, Dave.
Dead.
Happy 100th. Mark, I think we only, we did an episode of Don't Mention the Sea back in March, April, May 2020.
Lockdown.
Somewhere around there.
I don't know.
We're now looking at December 2022. So good, almost 2 years, 3 years later.
It's 2.5 years.
2.5 years. And do you honestly think that at the beginning of 2020 that you would have 100 episodes of episodes generally covering Red Dwarf? I mean, there is some exceptions, I think.
No, everything's got a link. I mean, I like podcasting, and I've done a lot of podcasts where it was just lots of fun, but not as successful as this one. And of all of them, I don't know, a very old, really kind of culty, British sitcom-y. I didn't expect the success we've had, and it's fucking great. And no, probably 100 episodes in, after a 20-minute chat with someone I'd only just met about Red Dwarf, that wasn't what I predicted, no. How about you?
No, really. I only came on to talk about Red Dwarf for 25 minutes.
Well, the thing is, what you ended up doing is been doing a Latham 25 minutes, which is probably about 6 hours.
Yeah.
But I mean, out of those 100 episodes, how many of them actually been about Red Dwarf?
I did look at this. There have been more specials than there have episodes covering specific episodes of Red Dwarf. We actually overtook that between series 6 and 7. And yeah, we've done more specials than we've done proper episodes.
But I think the main thing that I think we've got from this, though, as much as we often take as much as we kind of, or often as, or always take the piss out of Mark's habit of going special after everything we mentioned in our kind of behind the scenes group Facebook chat. We've not enjoyed anything.
No, exactly. And if we are being honest, it is
Captain Butler.
Well, I can say it because I'm on hardly any specials. I think I've actually been on 3 really good specials in the 3 million years with my good Matt Latham there. But in all honesty, though, I mean, you can imagine this podcast as anyone who normally do podcasts. To be fair, there's not a lot of podcasts out there. A lot of people decide to do a show, so a lot of people will go, "My favorite show is Star Trek," or "My favorite show is Yellow Jackets," and they will put all of their worth and everything into that podcast. Unfortunately for us, Mr. Matt Latham's got Pick a Disc and is on the Yellow Jackets podcast. I'm on the Xcast and the Star Trek Picard podcast, Make It So, and Yellow Jackets and everything else. And Mark, you've had a few as well. So behind the scenes, to be honest, you've got Free with This Month's Issue as well, for example, on We Dig Music. So this is something we love, but at the same time, we have other commitments to other things as well. So I think the specials do work well for that reason. But
what I also quite like as well is that I think, well, I'm coming from someone who's pretty much half of my output's me solo, but I do think the kind of rotation and kind of the team effort kind of helps drive the content. So like someone like, you probably had most of the main episodes, most specials. I've done a few specials of my own, Mark and Colin and Carl as well, and it's a team effort. So it's not like one person's got one job, one person's got another job. It's like, I think the kind of distribution or kind of the community aspect of like helping out in certain episodes or specials kind of helps out. Like, it's mainly a case of whoever's hosting edits or anything like that. So I think that's helped get us to 100 in a short amount of time. So
Yeah.
Yeah, we've just kind of gone, that sounds fun, let's do that, a lot of the time. And when I say we, what I mean is I've just gone, that sounds fun, let's do that, and dragged you lot along a lot of the time. But I love how we've got this core team of 5, and yeah, we mix it up, and yeah, it just kind of accidentally did really, really well. And I know the specials don't get as many listens as the main episodes, if we're going to call them specials and main episodes, but they do still get lots and lots of listens. People do seem to really genuinely like us talking absolute bollocks about random shite.
And I quite like the fact that we are covering, like, Red Dwarf adjacent stuff. So there's probably going to be people who've gone, oh, let's watch Captain Butler just because Craig Charles is in it. And then afterwards go, I regret watching this just because Craig Charles is in it. Yeah, and the same thing about A Prince Among Men. Like, oh, let's watch this because Chris Barry's in it. Oh, no, I've watched this because Chris Barry's in it.
I must admit, on that particular special, that I think I got through the first, 15 or so minutes of the first episode, switched it off, then listened to your special, and then that's about the end of that. I've got to understand what's going on with it, but and
the one where we broke Carl.
The one where you broke Carl, and I will say on air that, as somebody who has family who grew up in Liverpool, that I thank you all for joining the barrage against a newspaper that will not be named. So yeah, exactly. So being a Liverpool fan, not originally born there, but my family have born there, but definitely not an interesting one for me as well. So yeah, so thank you for that. So shall we talk about what we're here to talk about? Do you think?
Well, it's Christmas, isn't it?
Of course, Mr. Hall.
It is Christmas. We're going to be talking about a lovely old film called It's a Wonderful Life. And 1946 is when this was created. And it's based on a short story, The Greatest Gift, from Philip Van Dorenstern, which was written in 1939 and published privately in 1945. James Stewart plays George Bailey. We will talk about that shortly. And we get towards the end of the film, and we come into Christmas Eve, going to Christmas Day, where we meet the angel Clarence. One of those films that's really, really, really well known. It wasn't very good. It didn't have very good response at the time, and it's become a classic. So before we start and go any further, I think we've maybe alluded to some things here, but let's get an idea of where we stand with this film, and starting with Mark. Mark, if you want to first of all say if you remember or have the link there, how it's linked to Red Dwarf, but also what is your history with this film?
Well, wasn't it? Didn't Lister and Kochanski watch it together, and wasn't Better Than Life, Lister's Better Than Life, set in kind of It's a Wonderful Life world as well?
Yes. I think it's in the book, I think.
Yes,
it's
made
mentioned.
Explicit in the book, you're right.
Yeah. And it is Better Than Life in the actual episode where there's that wonderful scene where it goes across all of them, and Rimmer's just like pulling his face because he can't stand it. He's like, ugh, what the hell is this? So that's where it's come from. What about your history with the film then?
I had never seen it until about a week ago when I watched it for research for Shipwrecked Comatose, a podcast about Red Dwarf. And I don't know why. I know what it is. I knew the premise, and I knew it was like generally pretty well loved, and I just don't know why I'd never seen it. I just never had. I watch The Snowman every fucking Christmas. Like, without fail, I watch The Snowman. And I also get the ump if it hasn't got David Bowie at the start, because sometimes they cut that bit. So I know The Snowman really well. And I get the idea of watching the same thing every Christmas, and I know a lot of people do that with It's a Wonderful Life. I just never have.
Fair dues. Matt, what about you?
This is probably the second time I've ever watched it. For a good 20 years, I think. first time I watched it, I was about 16, 17, because I remember kind of getting, like, I think it was like one of the first times I had a VHS recorder. And I remember kind of recording it. I think it was like repeated later on like BBC Two. I remember recording it because I used to read a magazine that was in the UK called Cult Times. I don't know if anyone remembers it, or
I've read it a few times.
If anyone who doesn't know what it was, well, basically it was like a cult/science fiction magazine with like a few interviews and articles. But like for the last third, it was just basically listings. So it would just give you all the kind of cult or science fiction, fantasy TV shows, what time they were on and what channel they were on. And one of them, he mentioned It's a Wonderful Life, saying like, oh yes, the classic blah blah, where a man goes into a parallel universe where he's dead and where he's never been born and stuff. And I was like, oh, this sounds like an interesting kind of thing to perhaps watch. I haven't watched that many black and white films and stuff. And 16-year-old me went in expecting to see one of the first examples of like alternate dimensions in the film, and being really disappointed when it takes about an hour and 40 fucking minutes for it to happen.
We'll talk about that.
And watching, and I think that kind of had a sour taste in my mouth for ages about that, because teenage me, a bit of a prick about it. So it's me kind of think, I'm slightly more mature than I was back. Hey, I'm more mature. I have a mortgage now. 16-year-old me didn't have a mortgage.
Does that mean I'm as mature as 16-year-old you because I don't have a mortgage?
On the Latham scale, yes.
Fuck me.
So I decided to come at it again, but this time it's slightly mature, more. I know what to kind of expect, but I've forgotten some bits of it. 2 decades later. So that's my approach to this viewing.
So I'm slightly different in that I have seen this on multiple occasions, but with a bit of a proviso on this, and it happens to me a lot, because basically I started in my sort of post-school and educational life, I started working for the government and did that for 7 years. And then moved and had a bit of a side take, a kind of a different track, and went into the company I'm now working for and have done for almost 17 years now, coming up next month, actually. In 2006, I joined my work, and then that following Christmas, the end of 2006, I found out there was a bit of a tradition to show It's a Wonderful Life in my cinema, and I was the projectionist at that point. So in those days, we had it on 35mm film, so I couldn't really watch it. I had to do the work of it. So it was one of those films where I was aware of it. I knew a lot that people find it, as a Christmassy type film. I'm not naturally a Christmassy person, so which is wonderful being on a Christmas podcast, but I'm going to class it as a 100th episode. So I'd seen that, and then I think we went digital that year, and about 2 or 3 years later we showed it again, and it's become a bit of a tradition. Polar Express, you mentioned the Snowman. We do the Snowman and the Snow Dog, the Snowman, every single year, because they're such short movies that you basically have, we used to have supper with Santa, so we'd have people come for some supper at 4 or 5 o'clock, and Santa would make an appearance, and he'd go around all the tables and speak to everyone, and then he would introduce the film, and the film would normally be Snowman and Snow Dog together, put us together. In modern history, it's things like Gruffalo's Child, and stuff like that, Stickman, or whatever it may well be from Julia Donaldson's work. So that's what we kind of did, and A Wonderful Life was one of those films that we would often show. And with most things with those type of films, I actually, when it was on digital, I actually had the opportunity to watch it. So I watched it on my huge screen. But since then, I've watched the first 10, 15 minutes of the episode and then added the final 5 minutes, because you go in, start the film, you kind of hang fire, make sure everything's okay, then you leave, and then you come back later on, or you might go in halfway through the film and check it. So I'd only ever see the beginning, the end, and maybe a little bit in the middle. So there's massive bits where I actually, on watching it again yesterday, was like, oh, I forgot about this bit because I've only ever seen that once. And, so I've got a general overview, but not a detailed overview of the film. So that's where I'm coming from. So it is interesting that none of us really are completely au fait with it. And it's not a tradition in any of our households, which is quite strange. That being said then, Mark, what were your first impressions then of seeing this? How did you come out of this viewing of it?
So my initial thoughts at the end were, it's a bit like the Christmas Carol, isn't it? But then when I thought about it, it's more like the Inquisitor. Because if you think about it, he's taken out of history, like when the Inquisitor did that to Lister and Crichton, and they see what would have happened without them. Was the Inquisitor inspired by It's a Wonderful Life?
Probably. It's quite a sci-fi trope to do, though, isn't it? To take someone out
I don't
of...
think it would have been a sci-fi trope in 1940, whatever the fuck this was released.
I think so, because the book was
39.
1939.
Yeah.
Oh,
I wonder if there's an actual name for the trope.
TVtropes.org.
Yeah.
Wonderful resource. But
yeah.
you can see where I'm getting... There is a comparison between this and the Inquisitor. Or am I full of shit?
No, he's been taken out of existence. But does the Inquisitor really go through the whole, this is what happens when you're taken out of history?
Well, no, that's why I said it's a bit like Christmas Carol as well. Whereas, obviously, with Scrooge, it wasn't actually taken out of history at all. It was what happened this year, what happened previous years, and what happened after you died, unless you change it. Whereas with the Inquisitor and with this, it was explicitly you were taken out of history.
It's actually a trope namer. This created that kind of trope / plot.
Go me!
So it's called
Spotting
It's a
thing.
Wonderful Plot.
Yay!
It's a Wonderful Plot. After the movie It's a Wonderful Life, it's a device where an external force, usually supernatural, intervenes in a time of crisis to show the character facing said crisis in a flash sideways of how things would have been if one key part of their past had gone down differently. Most often, the change is that the character in question had never been born, may occur as part of a near-death experience, or following Smite Me, Oh Mighty Smiter. Episodes of this plot usually take place around Christmas time, because It's a Wonderful Life takes place around Christmas. If a show hasn't done yet another Christmas Carol episode yet, they'll be doing this one. So this is kind of like the genesis of that idea.
Amazing.
So,
Go me, actually spotting a thing.
So what did you think to it?
I liked it. It was kind of cool. Yeah, it was a fun film. And I was surprised, considering its age, how on certain things it didn't pull its punches. So that was a pleasant surprise. The acting was as good as it was going to be for a film made in the 40s. And yeah, I liked it. I've got a lot to say about it, actually.
Good. Well, I think the acting thing, it does seem slightly different to other 40s films. I mean, if we had someone like Carl Sweeney, he'd be able to be like straight on the ball on this. I'm not in any way a person to talk about, the history of 40s cinema. But the ones I have seen, there's a little bit of it in here, but they generally have moments where they're talking really quickly. It's a lot of that. But this one doesn't have as much. It's it seems, yes, I think the probably the closest was when they're actually in together outside the house, where in the dressing gown scene, where it's a little bit like that, where some of it's actually a bit more weighty, and I quite like the fact that it has that kind of weight to it.
That's from what I gather. Again, I apologise if anyone's going to start screaming at me what the technical terms are, but it's always like, because it's probably filmed on either soundstage or that the camera crews are always on one side, the technical process of being able to like shoot from different angles wasn't really there at that time, aside from very jarring close-ups where that was definitely filmed after the scene was that was finished. So there's like an element of stage play and like one takes kicking through it. So it feels like they're filming and performing a play that's just got in front of cameras, and that's where that kind of dynamic hits and stuff. And I think that where the kind of pacing speeds up and slows down, I think that's a case of just getting too much into the groove rather than actually having marks to be able to reshoot. So they're just trying to either get through a scene and stuff. And
No, I get that. And one thing I did have in my head to talk about was the actual set, because it is a set. Most of it is and it's a really good set as well. It comes across really well, especially when we get to Pottersville towards the end, and then the whole thing's being reshaped, and looking at all of the bars and stuff like that, and the clubs, and the kind of like the way that's become a seedy kind of element to the film, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I did feel that was kind of like really interesting, that obviously when you do go to those like sort of solo shots where they are on a set rather than actually within the, and I'm talking like set as in like a set rather than the actual Bedford Falls stuff. For example, him running towards the end where he's running and they shoot the Pottersville sign and the V disappears because he shot the thing. I thought was quite good. I think that probably does help it. What about you, Matt, then? So you've said you've seen it before, but a long time ago, maybe only the once. How did you feel on this watching?
I think I enjoyed it a lot more for what it was. I think some things that I think are slightly a product of its time. If you think about it, are they kind of making too much of something? Overall, I think when I started it, I was half expecting not to kind of click with it as much. So I was kind of only half watching it. I started writing. So I did actually start writing notes. And as you can see, I got to about 4 paragraphs. And about 4 paragraphs in was when I started actually getting really into it and completely forgot to write notes. I can see why it clicks with people. I can see kind of like the message it's trying to give. I mean, there are some counter arguments against the message it's doing, but it's just got that kind of weird feel good element to it.
Well, that's something I wanted to pick up because me being me and enjoying misery as I do, I was quite surprised. I mean, as I say, I've seen it a few times, so I've seen bits, but things like the run of the bank, for example. And just some of the general stuff that's in there is quite dark. I actually really enjoyed it as a solid, middle section, maybe the second act onwards, up until we get the Clarence turning in. I actually found it quite a dark film, and I on this watch was particularly like, do you know what? I actually really like it for that element. And a lot of people will often say, Wonderful Life. It's got a great meaning. It's got lovely themes on it. It's just incredible to think about the human emotional aspect and who your friends are and all of that change around, and they don't realize who you are. But the way that he spirals out of control is really dark, and I actually really appreciate the movie for going that dark in the 1940s.
There is some real darkness, I agree, and I think it starts really early where the boy is physically abused by an adult, and he bleeds out his fucking ear. That's grim. That's assault. And I was genuinely shocked by that. Not obviously because, I'm a horror nerd. I'm not shocked by a little bit of blood dripping out a kid's ear, but I was shocked by the brutality and the cruelty in what is considered to be like a feel-good, happy Christmas film. And because it was my first watch, that genuinely surprised me and shocked me.
So when we talk about the E and the bleeding, obviously that happened during the incident that happened earlier on at the very beginning of this episode, and that abuse that he gets, you wouldn't see that nowadays, would you? It just wouldn't happen.
Certainly, the character, the chemist, would have been much more demonised than he was. I think he ends up, again, being quite integral to the plot, but seen as quite fondly, whereas, a bloke who hits kids isn't actually something to be celebrated, regardless of what was going on in his life, I
think what they're trying to show is that he's emotionally compromised at that point. Now, obviously, we're talking about the 1940s. We're used to talking about the 80s and 90s. I mean, this was the 1940s.
I don't want to use the phrase 40s, Nick. I mean, part of me thinks, I think, I'm just wondering whether, as well, I don't know whether there's kind of law, like kind of child safety laws or something on the actual filming of the set, because I think it was actually it looks like the actors actually struck the child actor around the head. I think that was the more shocking bit for me. But then again, I'm pretty sure there are probably modern films that probably show non-gratuitous violence in terms of plot to kind of monitor stuff, just to carry the point across. And I think there's a couple of instances in the film as well where I think kind of societal norms or kind of behaviour is slightly different as it was back then. I think there's an episode, one of the first 2 or 3 episodes of Mad Men has an adult like smack another child who's not theirs for being unruly and naughty in full view of the child's parent, who's just sitting there smoking. So I think that's a kind of like a societal shift and stuff. I think it's also just to show how damaged.
Yeah, the emotional compromise. Yeah,
And how I think Mr. Gower was as well.
Because it was a death, wasn't it? That he actually was his son. He was alluding to, and the emotional aspect of that, and it's to clarify the mistake, the vital mistake that he makes, which comes really pertinent to the film.
I think what's interesting is that it's not sensitive or insensitive, in as much as I feel like it is a realistic depiction of how people saw stress and mental health problems in the 40s. It's quite scary that that's how they saw it, and it is almost like a different kind of scary to the elements that we talked about it being dark. But I do think it's very indicative of the time, and it's weirdly interesting historically as well.
What about the framing of the film at this point, where we're going through the ages and we've got Clarence, eventually seeing, because of he hasn't got his wings, so he can't be that all-seeing being, and time isn't available to him. Because he obviously the angels are seeing things in a non-linear fashion, that they can see the history and up until this point, and when Clarence arrives at the end, a lot of the expositional pieces are dealt with via that. So jumping in at this point to see the two girls who are going to be the love interests of George and all of that type of thing. How did you think that did that work for you, the way it was actually wrapped up? What I found fascinating for me personally is the use of galaxies being the flashing discussion, but that's another story.
I was going to talk about that. So obviously, as a humanist, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in angels, I don't believe in anything to do with the supernatural, etc., etc. This made me think, was this controversial in the 40s that God was a talking star?
Not a talking star, a talking galaxy.
Yeah, and I just it was an interesting way to do it, but was this controversial at the time?
I quite like the idea that it's probably not in this way, but it's just someone's going, oh, for Jesus Christ, someone won't shut up about this bloody George bloke. What's happening there? Oh crap! Right, okay. Well, Gabriel's on vacation. We all know where Lucy is. Crap, who we got? Right, okay, yeah, we need to get the second tier in. Let's bring Clarence. Right, Clarence, yeah, you've got a job, last minute job. These people won't shut up about this guy called George. That's the impression I'm getting. Because if these are all seeing beings who have to intervene, why didn't they intervene earlier?
And again, right, the whole bureaucracy of God and his different kind of angels doing stuff and having the inept guy. Really? I'm not offended by this, but it seems like for the 40s particularly, this could have been controversial. Or am I reading too much into it?
I know I've got the kind of, I'm poking fun of it. I think it might be a case of just reading too much into it. I think again,
it's a whimsical fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah, but again, I think we're in the 1940s. Society probably still hasn't developed the kind of we've not had punk yet. So the anarchist, atheist, humanist kind of belief hasn't kind of spread as much, or hasn't had the opportunity to spread as much as like Christianity has.
What I'm getting at.
So that viewpoint, probably hasn't affected. So people probably either had that kind of like idea that there either is a God or anything or not. I went to school in a Church of England school, so like we had for years I was convinced that God was real, even though I wouldn't class myself as a Christian. And this was in like the 80s, early 90s. So it might just be a case that this was more. It wasn't like controversial. It was just like, oh, it's a kind of another way of depicting faith or kind of God or the idea of angels in just a normal way.
Yeah, and I suppose it kind of like the ballpark year in which it was. According to looking quickly on Wikipedia, it says that a spate of movies just ended just after the ending of the Second World War, including It's a Wonderful Life and Stairway to Heaven. tapping into so many people's experience of loss of loved ones and the kind of consolidation. So it's one of those. Are they actually, given the war and things like that? Is it just one of those things that they're reaching out to these type of movies? And it does say that It's a Wonderful Life actually, to its detriment in some ways, because it is dealing with grief and it is dealing with a lot of close to the edge stuff that you might talk about. It kind of got lost in its way because, as I say, it didn't have critical acclaim at the beginning of its time when it first aired. It was only later on that it kind of got the status. So, yeah, I think maybe it's more to do with the yearning for something positive rather than actually, thinking about the deeper meaning of what the actual things are in the case of religion.
I just found it really interesting. Let's move it on to something a little bit less controversial. When he was dancing and he said, "I'm not very good at this." Would you like to know what I wrote in my notes?
Go on.
Fuck off, Sinatra. I can't dance like that. I'm not very good at this. Get in the sea. Get in the sea. What a load of absolute tosh.
Why Frank Sinatra? What's the
not
Sinatra reference?
What was his name? The one that was dead good.
God damn, Mr.
Randy
Adams.
Jones.
No, not Sinatra. Sinatra's the singer. Who was the dancer?
Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire.
Fred Astaire. That's what I meant. Oh, I don't know. I wasn't born in the 40s. I thought I made a very clever joke, and now I just look like an ignorant twat.
Yeah, you do. But hey, at least things are. I'm just amazed that the teen movie trope of everyone's a really good dancer originated in 1946.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's like Lampshade in not another teen movie.
Well, everyone would have done the Charleston. Can you imagine going uptown now and dancing the Charleston where everyone does it? Can you imagine it?
No.
The sound system was probably really shit in that hall, because I bet you the only thing you would hear is about 200 feet going. Because that scene, as it closes out, everyone starts dancing. All you can hear is the rapping of the feet of so many people in that small thing. I'm like, yeah, how the hell could anyone hear any music?
That's Matt's life.
Odd man.
That is Matt's life. If people can't hear music, there's no point in living. Need live music, and not people dancing. How dare you dance? I'm trying to listen.
No, it's not. It's not that. Well, I don't know whether it's the sound mixing in or something, but all you heard was just 200 pairs of feet just ramming against the floor.
That's fair enough. Until they actually fall in.
Yeah.
Which, for me, I was just like, oh my God. Okay. Whoa. They're going to fall. Whoa. And I was like, oh God, this is horrible. This is so cheesy. So cheesy. But very thematic. Very thematic.
But was it cheesy at the time?
Probably not.
But was it cheesy at the time? It's difficult to watch something this old without picking holes in it and lolling at the acting and stuff. But I do feel like the vast majority of this film wasn't super cheesy and hokey and...
Oh, no, yeah, totally agree.
Unwatchably bad, basically.
Yeah. But I'm part of that. I just don't like cheese. But part of the question was about theme, because they go into that swimming pool and then people eventually start to follow. That for me is kind of quite a thematic choice to actually use, I think, personally.
Well, just to find this thing that's happened, just find the fun in it.
Things happen to you, these things happen, and, it's meant to be, the whole element is a practical joke, it's a prank. Everyone laugh at them, but then eventually you get the guy diving in eventually, and that's the laugh, because it's actually, if you can't beat them, join them kind of thing. It kind of has that feeling of, everyone's rallying around George, even though it's he's had something really bad happen to him because the practical joke's been played on him. So if I going back to the beginning as well, as I say, with the way that it's been written and sort of drawn out, in that we do get to see these time shots that you get very early on, going back to the scene in the chemist, the kind of interplay that we're going to have between Mary and I think it's Violet. What about their kind of that kind of relationship, and the aspect of she's always the woman that's after George, and wants to give her the attention, but then later on in the film we get him saying about let's go and run in the hills all barefoot, and that becomes a bit of a practical joke. And then you've got the Mary kind of character as well, where we get to see the Charleston through the obvious affection that they both have for each other. How do you think that worked? Because there is some element of stuff that happens within the film, but how do you think the general introduction of that as them being children and then going into the rest of the film?
I don't think that's really capitalised on as much. I think it's less about. I think it's less a look right. It's more of a case of showing how kind of George relates to them or like interacts with them later on. So later on in the film, we see that George helps Violet to want to move to New York and everything like that as part of that. So he's always kind of had like a friendship with her, whereas like with Mary, there's a very longer conversation in the fact that I don't really buy their relationship at all.
You mean the conversation about the moon?
Yeah.
So I put down for that, are they on drugs?
Because the weird thing is, like, doesn't he, I think, walk out? I think time jumps for 4 years later after she comes back from college, but he's staying, and like one of the main points is that he's always in Bedford Falls. So he goes out, and there's like a weird thing where he's like drunk something. He goes, I'm going to go out and get some necking. He basically says he's going to go out on the pull, and then bumps into Mary, and then just doesn't like that felt weird. That felt weird to me.
Do you not think that kind of thing is like putting the bravado on, but when it comes to real emotion, that he's kind of just like, I don't really want to be seen as that in front of her. But the Violet kind of conversation is more a case of that it's almost like an unrequited love for her, because she obviously wants his attention and he's not giving it. And it's that kind of barrier of, that actually grows more and more because she actually had it. But then obviously, which is quite, I think, actually quite good that by the end of it, like you're saying, she respects the fact that she's been given the opportunity to go and live her dreams and stuff. Whereas the Mary thing is kind of like it's that push and pull in that scene with the dressing gown of that she wants a married life with him and he wants to go away, and it's like that push and pull right through the film. She's like the central thing in which everything revolves around, because is being drawn in. He's been drawn into that world and can't get out of the world, but there's obviously all the other things it's drawn him back in as well. So I think that there's that element to Mary that it focuses on a lot more, because it's more about that. It's more about that family life that, like the film, often people say, it's got some great themes. It's all about family life and stuff like that. Well, there's an argument to say, is that really the right thing to be like pushing on? Is it, in modern terms, is that something that you really would want to talk about? Is it wrong that somebody wants to just go and live their own life and do what they want to do and not have that family unit? So there's a bit of social commentary there, but I do feel that Mary is there for that purpose, to like sort of have that gravitational pull for him.
No, I think that's pretty right. Well, when he goes around a house, I don't get why he's so offish. He's genuinely kind and decent to everybody else, but then he's a right bell end, basically.
He's a prick.
I didn't get it.
I think it is that. I think that the point, well, obviously, we've only seen it properly once. I think the point of that is that it's too close to home. That it's, it is that thing of like, it's something he wants subconsciously, but he is actively trying to distance himself from it, because in his mind, he's wanting to go and live in the world and go and visit South America and go and do all these things. But she's the one pulling in, and he's trying to push against that, and that's what's causing him the conflict.
I see. Okay, yeah, I'll buy that.
Is it a case that he's settled for Mary again because of the link to home? But then again, because I think George, I think he's like trapped because of a sense of like an obligation for, and again, slight diversion. slight divergence because he's like there's an obligation to kind of carry on the work that his dad did to try and keep people in homes. I think the whole pretty much surprisingly large amount of banking and home ownership that this film has is like ridiculous. But my understanding is that I think that his dad set up this business to try and which I think is always constantly making a loss.
Yeah, it's kind of like a credit union, isn't it? It's designed.
I was going to say it's a credit union, isn't it?
It's basically designed that they would go for loans for like home ownership or whatever it may well be. Though, given the credit union comes in, everyone's money, because that's what the whole run of the bank is about. So the fact that he hasn't got arguments say 20 grand in the bank, because that's being loaned to George and that's being loaned to Mark and that's being loaned to Matt. So they're saying, I want my money out. Well, they're saying, well, we haven't got that money. It's currently with Matt because Matt is buying his house. And that's why the 60-day thing comes in, because it's like, if you run on this bank right now, you're gonna bankrupt us instantly because we don't have that money. We don't physically have it in real terms. And apparently it is actually referenced a few times that I've seen recently, just while doing a quick research, that this is probably the best description of it. So it's actually been alluded to that you actually can watch this and actually understand what's going on more than a lot of like sort of textbooks might. And people have gone, actually watch It's a Wonderful Life, because it gives you more of an idea, especially being post-depression and things like that. So
yeah. So I think because of that, but I think because of this company that his dad set up, which kept a lot of people like in homes and able to afford houses because a lot of, but again a completely different world. People can afford homes back in the 40s. Political satire.
Little bit of politics.
Yes. A little bit of politics. I'm sorry, Mr. Potter.
Oh God, this is gonna come back to haunt us, isn't it?
But he's carrying. I think partly he wants to kind of carry on the work and kind of what his dad did to keep these people in their homes and to try and stop the Mr. Potter from. Because I have an obligation, but I think to keep his stuff, it's kind of kept him from living his dreams of like exploring the world and everything. But then I think in the flip side, so he kind of settles down with Mary. But then interestingly, Mary's kind of dream is that she actively chooses to come back to pursue George. But I don't think George as a character is fully empathetic enough to understand that's what she's done, and doesn't appreciate that. I think part of him kind of resents the fact that she's been able to go,
I would agree with that,
and he comes back.
Yeah. Because the thing about his empathy, and as you say, I think this is why his character is really interesting, because it's quite nuanced. It's not a case of like, you'd expect something of this ilk, of this era, to be a bit more not on the nose, but kind of like sort of full front and what it's actually trying to talk about. This is kind of a nuanced thing for me. It's the way that you talk about the obligation of his dad, and we'll talk about the scene with Mr. Potter soon. But that idea that he's defending his dad, he defends everything, but he's put in that position. He's not like necessarily, he doesn't choose to do that. He's put in that position, and he has to do it because he was out the door at that point. And I think. You have to do that in this, and I think there'll be a number of opportunities as we go through this, where we'll talk about how he, not necessarily out of character, but how he reacts and how he kind of like sort of even like the point where he does end up at the gate of Mary's on that time when they're back, that he kicks that gate open, and that frustration, and it's all about the going to the end scenes where he's spiraling out of control. There's loads of times where he spirals out of control, and he's quite reactive in that way. And again, that scene with the bank or the building and loans thing, it's you can see just how agitated he is by the fact that he's being kept there. Although, again, the layer is that he's being kept there because he doesn't want that to fail, but at the same time, he is being held against his will to a degree. And it's interesting how it flips later on. Yeah.
What's interesting is that there's a lot of themes about doing the right thing in this, and you're right about him like going through the door. He could have just given it all up, but he needed to take that job for everybody else. I don't know what the message is really, because
for me, just when you're talking about that, then like everything that he tends to do is out of his control, but when we get the Clarence aspect and the looking at the world and what he's actually got, he's not aware, he's not self-aware enough during those moments. So yes, he's a lovely character, yes, he's got empathy, yes, he will protect his dad, yes, he does this, yes, he does that, but at that time he doesn't see it as that. So he's not seeing the bigger picture, he's not taking that step back, he's in the moment, and he's got a very subjective viewpoint of the world, where Clarence is giving him that objectiveness later on. It's all about subjective and objectiveness in that way, because Clarence gives him the objectiveness of going, actually, look what you've done. You know, whereas during the course of the 3/4 of the film, it's all about him being subjective and having the desire to leave, but not seeing what he's doing.
Yeah, and I think quite a few times as well. I think as the film goes on, it feels like he's not fully aware that he's actually doing a really kind of good job in saving everyone from Mr. Potter.
Who is this person that keeps popping in?
From it.
I don't know. This random person just keeps popping over. It's almost like it's a little raven or crow or something that lands on someone's shoulder and just talks. And...
Right. What this fucking crow? What's this crow about? I didn't get it. Right. I was going to ask you. There's a random crow, and then later on there's a random squirrel. Well, why?
I only wanted to say this because you found my kryptonite. I can't say squirrel. Squirrel. I know.
You just said it.
I don't roll my R's enough when I try and say it. Squirrel.
It's not pronounced squirrel, is it? It's squirrel.
People at school used to say, okay, what's that? Squirrel. It's squirrel.
That's how Black Country's called school.
I have the problem with school.
School.
I went to school
when I was younger.
I put my shoes on to go to school, and then I put them on the floor.
I went to school.
I went to school on the floor. Went to school.
School. I can't say the ools or squirrels.
You've not answered my question. Why is there a random fucking crow? And why is there a random fucking squirrel?
Yes. In the flipping...
And Uncle Billy's squirrel and Uncle Billy's crow. Is that what we're talking about, aren't we?
No.
Uncle Billy's.
Just a squirrel and a crow. Why do they?
Yeah, because it flies over to him at one point, because it basically sits on his shoulder, because you see Uncle Billy later on. It's his pets.
A pet crow?
Yeah.
Why would you have a pet crow? Right, why is it not a fucking budgie or something? Did they have budgies in the 40s?
But things are, well, I think when you think about the very limited palette you've got for black and white cinematography, I think a crow will probably be a bit more visually striking than particularly with the very quite light set.
Okay, can I go all filmy with you?
Go on then.
Right, so the representation of a crow in Western culture symbolises death, the afterlife, wisdom, intelligence, adaptability, prescience, fortune, destiny, transformation, and the future. That's what a crow is.
Marvellous. What about the squirrel?
I don't know about squirrel. Let's have a look at squirrel then. I can't believe you got me saying that so many times. The squirrel totem animal represents rebirth, renewal, energy, positivity, hard work, duty, and balance.
Fucking hell, that's what they're there for then. Yeah. They still make no sense in the context of the film, but if they're representing a thing, okay, fine.
There you go. Anyway, we're talking about banks and stuff. Should we talk about Mr. Potter? Mr. Potter.
Well, he's a right bellend, isn't he?
Go on then. Mr. Potter. So, okay, I'm not figured it... Yeah, so he's played by... I think by then, a veteran film and theatre actor called Lionel Barrymore. And on his Wikipedia page, there's a link to the Barrymore family, acting family. And I've not actually looked at it on an actual desktop yet, but on the mobile version of Wikipedia, it's very difficult to find out how he's related to Drew Barrymore.
Right, okay. I mean, he is Scrooge. isn't he? Basically,
Yeah.
He's just a formation of Scrooge. He's a redrafted version of him.
He is quite Scroogey.
Yeah.
Very Scroogey, and he doesn't learn anything because we're not talking about him. His betrayal. That I'm talking about, like sort of how nuanced that George is. That Potter isn't. Potter he's quite an evil bastard. You know, especially given that $8,000. Given that, you know, in today's prices that would be around about $150,000. You know, it's a hell of a lot of money to lose. But I suppose the stakes needed to be that high to be able to like sort of to go down the final act, and even like sort of like he plays to a point where, you know, he gets the offer. You know, it's sort of like the deal with the devil aspect of it as well. You know, when he gets that offer, and I always find that the scene where where George has to sit down at the table and the chair's really low and it actually flattens down. It causes him to go down. You know, to enable that power dynamic that Potter is looking down at George, and just how that power dynamic works, and especially given that the only way that Potter sees a way around this is to offer him that job to get him out of the way, which is where he put him in the first place. But he's become such a difficult person to deal with that this is his last throw of the dice. And what I actually find really fascinating in that scene is not necessarily most of it. I'm like, oh, right, whatever. Is the life insurance is like that is like where you're better off dead than alive. You're actually worth more dead than you are alive, which obviously lights the litmus paper, which I think at that time is really dark, and I kind of really like that aspect of it.
I mean, it's grim, but it's kind of true. My dad's not in his 70s, and he has become quite a morbid old sod since my mum died. And he keeps saying stuff to me like, well, you'll be very rich when I pop my clogs, son. And I'm like, I know it's true, but I don't want to hear it, and I prefer a dad, because it sucks not having a mum.
What do you think to Potter and some of the scenes that he's in and how he's portrayed and what he does?
I mean, yeah, it's very much kind of Ebenezer Scrooge, but without the chance for redemption. I think if anything, he's all Scrooge is just a money pinching skinflint, whereas Mr. Potter seems to be a case that even Scrooge will probably go, bloody hell, he's a bit of a twat, isn't he?
He's entitled, yeah.
So he kind of actively wants to get rid of the buildings and loan company. Like basically, he also wants to which probably means people will be evicted from their homes. So
he wants the land. He wants the land. Yeah. So I mean, it shows you when it comes out that, especially the Bailey Park. Is it Bailey? I keep forgetting Bailey's Park. Yeah. So
Bailey's Park. Yeah.
When he does that, that's exactly what he's after.
Yeah. Well, put George Bailey in prison because of a mistake someone else did, and keep £8,000 that he just can't. That even the accountants go, "Where's £8,000 gone?" I don't know. Yeah. So he's quite. I mean, there's not much in terms of like two-dimension, like a third dimension. He's very kind of a flat 2D villain more than anything. But I think it's a case of him not being. I don't think the character will work if there's a sense of likability, or if you get a sense of his background. I mean, all we know is that he's been kind of like disabled and very lacking mobility for most of his life, considering we've seen him over the course of 30 years and hasn't aged a day.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. He looks like he's stayed 60.
Well, Sir Patrick Stewart did, so I can buy it.
True.
But yeah, I think as much as I'm saying that he's not a kind of fleshed out villain, he's more 2D. I think the story needs that element to it to have that antagonistic thing. It's basically he's the bot. So Mr. Potter's the bot is the wrecking ball, and George is pretty much the thing that's not. He's basically the wall that's protecting everyone else from this wrecking ball. For a metaphor that I'm just starting to think in my head that I haven't thought out properly. But yeah, so basically he's been pounding at the wall that is George Bailey for years, eventually getting it to break. And I think that's all that Mr. Potter needs to be, really.
I mean, I suppose that the nuances, which is where we can probably talk about now because it does include him, is the scene, and it is a from what I can see, a famous scene that people do recount. And if you type in "Wonderful Life" into YouTube, then this scene often comes up, and it's the bit where he does defend his dad, and you've got the partners, you've got the partners in the business or whoever they are at that point, that they're willing to sell the buildings and loan company. They're kind of going, the executives can make that decision. So it's a democracy in that way, that Potter is denied that aspect of it because of the democracy of like the partners saying, well, actually, it's fine, that he's won him over with that speech that he gives. So that speech is really, really important to the story, because it does keep it, and as you say, builds that wall of like, right, okay, well, Potter basically turns around and goes, well, that's fine, okay, then I'm not going to win this way, but I'll wear him down, right? Because he'll just be like his dad. He'll just eventually, we'll wear him down. We'll get this story out, but then it doesn't happen. So it's changed by so many years later. He changes his tack by doing this deal with the devil aspect of like, I'll offer him a job to get him out of that seat, because I still need to get at that. I've tried it with the run on the banks closing down at 6 p.m. He's got $2 left, which is another aspect which we probably need to talk about. The fact that everything that he's done, he's still protecting that he's creating that wall. But Potter didn't have any choice at the time, and this is another tack that he tries to do. So there is an element of like the actual story. Yes, he's a villain, and he's very kind of two-dimensional, but at the same time, there is nuance within the actual plot and the narrative of the story to create that aspect.
Yeah, he has to be the cackling bad guy, and I think they use an interesting term that I wanted to note. He uses the term yokel quite a lot, and I think if we were looking at an equivalence for modern society, he'd probably be using something like scrubber or chav, both of which are horrifically offensive terms for the working class. And I think you might miss that. The character really is fundamentally cruel and condescending. And I think Matt got it right with Scrooge without the redemption.
The difference between, I think, A Christmas Carol and this is that the protagonists of The Christmas Carol are the three ghosts, and the antagonist is technically Scrooge. But we begin to think that Scrooge isn't just an antagonist; he's just been beaten down. It's
almost the reverse, isn't it? It's like it's a redemption arc for Scrooge, but this is like building George Bailey up.
I think at some point, I think you could say that George Bailey could actually, without Mary and William and like Harry and any family, like George Bailey is like an alternative version of Scrooge, just with slightly different. Because I could probably foresee like with a few key decisions, George Bailey becoming Scrooge.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yeah, he's again that gravity drawing. He's got those people that draws to him.
Yeah, when you compare Scrooge to Potter, we don't really know much about Potter's background, but I don't think Ebenezer Scrooge would perhaps go as low as Potter would do to purposely spite someone. He'd probably just I mean, we never get an example of it, but I don't think Scrooge would just take someone's money without just cause for it.
He's not like someone who we might know in recent history that says, that cleaners can be replaced by robots or anything like that at all, and have to sleep in the actual places where they work and cannot work from home and have to have the ultimate work ethic. There's no one like that at all, is there?
Oh no.
No.
Oh no. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone. So talking about the $2 thing, because again, Mary gives up that. There's an interesting couple of scenes in there that I'm watching it the second time, and I've watched it twice a while back, but then watched it yesterday. Is it William? Is William the driver?
Ernie's the driver, and Bert's the police officer.
Bert and Ernie, I know. Yeah,
yeah. I giggled. There's actually on the Muppets wiki. There's a whole article dedicated Are Bert and Ernie named after the characters from It's a Wonderful Life? But
Really?
apparently it's completely coincidental because I think Jim Henson thought that the names fit together.
Oh, right, okay.
But I'm pretty sure. I bet you that Jim Henson probably never realised subconsciously influenced by
It's got to be. It's got to be, hasn't it? It's just too much of a coincidence. No, So what I found fascinating on this watch was Ernie. There's a lot of times where they're saying that he doesn't. That there's a lot of moments where he acts as if he doesn't know them. So like when we got the scene at the house where they're having the romantic evening together because they have lost all the money because there's only got the $2 left that Mary gave up to be able to not go to the world for his honeymoon. That you've got that, but then you've also got moments when he's at the door, he kind of like acts as the waiter and I don't know who you are, blah blah blah. And there's a couple of times where they do that, and in the actual car itself, the taxi itself, when they're about to leave before they run on the bank, he said he kind of acts as if he doesn't know them. He says something along the lines of like, "Oh, who are you?" kind of thing, or something like that. Anyway, and then the final act is it's Ernie that comes to him and doesn't know him originally at the point of like you know who I am, and it's then at the end it's that kind of aspect. So I like that that's threaded through the actual film. That it's there's a few times where it's like I don't know you, and then he doesn't know him, and then
like an ongoing joke between mates and stuff. Like
it becomes a thing over the course of the film, but then by the end of it actually becomes quite pertinent. So I just like that they actually fluttered that into the world.
Yeah, but I want to talk about the when he pretended to be the butler and they had the bridal suite. That was probably my favourite scene of the entire film because it's something that kind of means quite a lot to me, really. The kind of working class solidarity, and it matters more how much effort you put in for something rather than how much money you put into something. And that's a very kind of Christmassy themed thing. And I think maybe I was in a Christmassy mood, maybe I was in a bit of a all my friends are comrades mood as well, but that scene was definitely my favourite of the whole film. I really, really liked it. It really made me smile. It was really sweet. It was really genuine. And yeah, it was great. It was really great.
I think what I quite like about that scene as well is that I think it's one of the first instances of she doesn't get much. I don't think she gets much on her own. Well, it's not really her film, really, but the character of Mary. I think what we do see is that because I think it's her that ends up pretty much doing DIY for the house and repairing it whilst George is at work, and like she manages to improvise and makes his honeymoon at the house that they've got, which is like a fixer. It's a bit of a fixer-upper, but it's basically her that does all the fixer-upping. And I quite like how the film kind of shows very briefly in the montage. It's her doing all the DIY stuff, and it's quite resourceful in doing quite a good job. I mean, there's the ongoing thing where there's the house being quite drafty.
Yeah,
but I do quite like the fact that it's all pretty much seems to be her that's done all the work for it, improvised the honeymoon, and you get like the impression that she's quite creatively able to think on her feet.
Yeah,
is also something that sets up what she does in the basically the end of the film, because I think it's her that kind of rallies everyone together.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
So you have that kind of setup done in that kind of creative way and stuff. And I mean, the only question I've got is, when were ovens invented? Because did they? Because all I've got is
just in general. Mark, when were chip pan fryers invented?
That's right, because like they've got that turkey that's like rotating on the spit roast and stuff, and I was like,
maybe they couldn't afford ovens.
Google says Robert Yeoman invented the oven in order to make cooking process quicker and easier in 1735.
Wow. Okay, that's old and nice, but I thought it was a lot later than that.
No, it was invented at 25 to 6 today. Is that what you're telling me?
Anyone ever says they don't learn anything listening to this podcast?
I just love the
Thank
fact
you,
that
Google.
as a 100th episode, all we've got is like Mark just like looking at his phone, just like generally chilling out, going, "Yeah, we've got an oven that's 1735. Let's see what we've got next. Let's see. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's good. And what I will
Would
say
you like
is,
me to Google anything else to make our content exceptionally good?
When was the rotary phone created? Because I really quite like, yeah, I quite like the old style. I don't know what they're called, but you know the separate handsets and receiver phones.
oh right, yeah.
The rotary
Yeah.
dial telephone was patented in 1913. The device functions according to the pulse dialing principle. In this type of telephone technology, a DC loop circuit is interrupted according to a defined digit coding system for each signal transmitted. This allows the exchange to identify the caller's telephone number. I didn't understand that.
I did.
I kind of did. When was the when was the first Christmas jumper? Seeing that Mark is the only one wearing one.
I'm not a fan of jumpers in general, so I'm not a fan of
Or sweater? Do we need to, like, for our international audience?
woolly thing you put over your head.
How many
It
holes
has
does a
been
jumper have?
argued that the gaudy knitwear we now know today was descended from the jumpers worn by Scandinavian fishermen in the 1890s.
Okay.
Then it still predates this film.
Christmas fact for you there.
So far, all of these have predated It's a Wonderful Life.
I mean, no one was wearing a Christmas jumper, I don't think. I didn't pay that much attention.
No.
My kind of film.
When was Holly a thing? When was Holly a thing for Christmas?
People can Google this shit themselves, Kurt.
Remember, listeners, if you want to ask Mark things, you can tweet him. You can tweet him to Google things for you.
It's like,
Hi, I'm
hello, Mark.
Mark Adams.
Can you tell me?
Humorous celebrant.
Hello, Mark.
Humorous.
Can you tell me when Human Celebrant started?
I mean, I should actually know that off the top of my head. I know humanist ceremonies started about 2 centuries ago. They were they probably weren't called humanists. You don't want to know. You're just being dickheads.
No, I'm not. I just
Well, Mark, we're promoting your new service as like, okay,
New
human celebrant,
service, I've been doing it 5 years.
hang on.
Ask
No,
Mark.
the human Googler.
Hey, Mark. That's the call sign now.
1880s was when the first humanist ceremony was recorded. So there you go.
Anyway, phones.
Yeah. So where were we?
And that is that's on Humanist Heritage. Just Google Humanist Heritage. It's a no one cares, Mark. heritage.humanists.uk. There you go. Cats, Christmas.
Well, let's talk about Harry, because Harry is the ultimate hero, isn't he? He's the ultimate hero.
The MacGuffin.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think he's single-handedly took down 15 planes. He's got a massive award, and he comes back. So he's, as I say, he's the MacGuffin, a big story element. Obviously has the wife, so he kind of has a reflection on what he could have been. George with the money situation, that he trying to put himself through college, through the incident that happened at the beginning of the film. It doesn't happen because of his injury to his ear, but the idea that he's living his life is an interesting one, or what he perceives to be his life.
Yeah, it is as well, because he isn't particularly nasty about it, but you can see that he's disappointed that it wasn't his. He's an interesting character, George. I think he's probably a lot less resentful than perhaps other people might have been.
Yeah, or he hides it. Or it hides it well. I think he suppresses it.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah,
He suppresses it to the point, and I think it is pretty much. It is pretty much like the events at the end, like the events of like the hour and 30 mark, which set off kind of like all this kind of repressed resentment. But I don't think. But I think. But because he seems to not, because it's quite a low resentment. I think he's just been building for that long, so it's not a case of sudden resentment that he doesn't snap. He's just. So I think he's quite happy for the people who go off to do things, I think he's generally kind of happy about his brother, because he's I think because he organises the welcome parade when he comes back, so he has all the banners and stuff. I think but there's still that kind of lingering. I could have had that.
Yeah.
I could have seen the world.
I think
I could have shot.
you're definitely right. The suppression, it's a snap that happens, as you say, from about the hour and 30 mark.
Because I think as well, because they pretty much had the same upbringing. The only thing difference I think is that I think Harry doesn't have George's business acumen, so to speak. So like, I mean, because it's George that saves up the money for college. Like, saves is the wall that's stopping the wrecking ball from destroying Bedford Falls. It's a different kind of hero that's not in the main media. So like, yeah, it's George is the kind of person that would probably get but also get really pissed off that the One Show had organised one of those like things that they do, saying, "Oh, all your friends and family have come round for you." This is my Alex Jones impression for some reason. Yeah.
It's magnificent.
They want to say thank you. They want to say thank you, George.
And the whole Welsh contingent no longer listens to the podcast.
Honestly, is there anyone he hasn't offended yet?
Yes, it's good. I think Rhiannon might listen to this. She's a Red Dwarf fan. She's from Wales. Let's see. Let's see if she tweets anything out on Boxing Day.
Okay. The general feeling like he's one of those like unsung heroes that like say like they'll probably get like saying the One Show saying like, oh, we've also got, I don't know, Ronan Keating to send you a message. And I'm not going to do the Irish accent because apparently I'm no good at accents, apparently. George, we just want to say, these lovely people want to say how much you've done for this, blah, 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 blah. We want to say that you are, in fact, a hero and that you are worthy of kind of like praise or that the role that you do. But I don't think George can't see that. In his eyes, it's the Medal of Honor, the kind of the heroicness of the kind of bravery stuff that he sees. So his vision of what a hero and a kind of role model for people is Harry, because of the black and white nature of what war is or what a hero is. I don't know how much of the good that people do is something that's probably picked up on in like more modern times. So like not all heroes wear capes, for example. But what I do find quite funny is that what interesting is that the film seems to actually be aware of that, and I don't know whether that's because the film is quite progressive in that way in terms of highlighting that not all heroes are people that shoot Nazis in planes.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah,
but protect people from like evil landlords.
Yeah.
The film seems to want to specifically highlight that George is completely unaware what that is.
So let's move on to, we mentioned it a couple of times, the hour and a half. We finally get to see Clarence. We've seen Clarence, or we've heard Clarence in star form, and we've had some exposition over the show, over the film as we go through. And first of all, I just wanted to mention that the Christmas Eve kind of comes in very late. Into the thing, even to the point where, some people have, when I've looked into other people watching it for the first time, which I sometimes do, look on reactions, they're like, this is a Christmas movie. It's like Christmas Eve doesn't turn up till about an hour and 25 minutes into the story.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a kind of key stalwart of that Die Hard's not a Christmas movie because it's a summer blockbuster that was released in June, just set at Christmas. I think there's a higher case of Die Hard being a Christmas movie than this might be.
The just one thing I wanted to mention from a behind the scenes perspective is that in the past they used cornflakes for snow, and because of the type of set and because of the way they wanted to do this, talking about the stomping like we did earlier on, is they looked for alternatives because they didn't want the crunchiness of the cornflakes to actually create. So they kind of created the idea of actually doing something different other than using cornflakes as snow.
Oh, so this pioneered alternative ways of snow and stuff.
Yeah, apparently.
I didn't realise that there was like technological advances for this. So this was the Jurassic Park of its day, then, was it?
Yeah, it must have been.
It's like
a really ingenious idea to have, I mean, this is where it gets really dark. I'm sure, Mark, you've got something to say about these scenes, so we'll talk about this scene in general. But an ingenious way to bring out the actual suicidal thoughts that that George has, and he's literally within a breath of doing this. What did you make to it, Mark?
So the first thing I wanted to talk about with regards to the suicide element of this film, only briefly looked at in this, but it's interesting that at the time in a lot of places suicide was considered to be a crime rather than someone having problems with their mental health.
Isn't there someone who says that in this film?
That's why I've brought it up.
Because he wouldn't have got the life insurance had it because it wouldn't have actually worked.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating that people who attempted to take their own life were imprisoned in the past, and that's really kind of a scary thing that these people that were having these awful thoughts and these awful problems with their mental health were punished rather than helped. But what I also think is interesting is Clarence is depicted as stupid. But this is a really good idea, playing on the fact that he knows that George is a man that goes out of his way to help others. He gives him something that makes him realise who he is by pretending to be someone who needs help.
He's basically Lieutenant Columbo's George Bailey.
Yeah, but
he's Columbo.
He's been depicted, when he was in the Stars, he was depicted as stupid. His peers thought he was stupid. 5 minutes later, he's really, really fucking stupid. But at this point, it's actually very intelligent the way he deals with the situation that's put in front of him. And it feels really odd that he understands the person he's trying to help so well that he distracts him from his thoughts of suicide by appealing to what is generally the core part of his nature, that he is a good man who wants to help others. And yeah, I think it says a lot about the character of George, and this feels really legitimate because he's been built up as this selfless man, but he gets to the end of his tether, but he's still quintessentially the same man. And again, this film is remarkably sophisticated, and this is really well done. Like, really, really well done.
I'm so sorry. I just accidentally found out that the crow that you was on about is has its own Wikipedia page. Jimmy, often ironically credited as Jimmy the Crow, was a raving actor who appeared in more than 1,000 feature films from the 30s to the 50s. It's in fact a high-profile cameo.
Good grief.
Jimmy was the crow that landed on the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz in '39. Apparently Frank Capra cast the bird in every subsequent movie he ever made after 1938. But yeah, I think as Mike was saying, I think it's, again, for lack of a better term, the Columbo method of trying to capitalise on knowing, of trying to hate what would make George believe that he's now in this kind of in this world, or that he's trying to help him. But he's never deceptive. He's just honest and true, saying like, so he's like, oh, I'm an angel.
Yeah.
We don't have wings. I ain't got them yet.
I'm a second degree angel, or whatever, AS2.
Yeah, like second class angel, and AS2. Yeah, but but I do think as well. I mean, I think Henry Travers, I think he's like fifth build, but he's only in the film for 15 minutes of screen time, and I think I personally think he kind of steals the film. Jimmy Stewart. Yeah, I think Henry Travers is really, really well as Clarence.
Yeah. And as you say, like Mark was saying, the way he plays the just kind of the matter of fact, and and even like sort of in the scene later on when they're at the car and he says something, and I keep telling you, and he's just kind of, he's quite jovial in the way that he's portraying it, and but it's a very astute thing to, as I say, the actual astuteness of like, I'm going to be the one that needs saving, and which instantly clicks for George to actually dive in and do the right thing and look and have that empathy for somebody who's actually in trouble. And it's just wonderful the way that he says it. It's like what did he say? He says, "Oh yeah, I saved him." What? No, I saved you. No, I saved you. You're going to commit suicide. I was like, actually, bloody hell, yeah. And it's just marvelous way of doing it.
Yeah, I think there's apparently on the TV Trope site there's a TV trope called Fail the Spot Check, and there's 3 instances of that. There's the George and Mary, the only couple who don't realise they're dancing over a swimming pool until they fall into it. Uncle Billy losing $8,000 in an envelope. But then when George is about to commit suicide, Clarence jumps in first, so George naturally jumps in to save him. But what happens is that George fails to realise that Clarence was not on the same level he actually jumps from above him. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Huh. Yeah, we also head back to the bar, and when they head back to the bar, we because there's obviously drink driving involved when he crashes the thing. So that for me, obviously we look at it in a very different world now, but that for me, it's more a case of to elevate his mindset rather than anything else. It's not it's not like he's crashed the car because he's drunk. It's more like he's just not thinking right, and that's where his thoughts are. But yeah, I mean, what do you make, Matt, to the bringing in, as I say, going back to the very beginning of this film with Mr. Gower and having this happen, and him spending the 20 years behind bars and stuff, because it actually quite significantly signposts this in the film when they have like the pause moment where it's like, remember this for later, people. Which is an interesting development in the film as well, which is very kind of pointed, but it what actually strangely enough works. Where I might have said, I could have easily said, well, it's a bit obvious in modern day times, but even in modern day thing, I think it would be really interesting to do it that way. Remember, folks, this is something for later. Note it down, keep an idea, and it actually probably would check off. Yeah, but it actually probably would work better nowadays rather than doing the whole. I'm watching the film, Matt, and I'm just gonna write my notes. I'm just gonna be on my phone, and I didn't see what happened there. What happened? It's actually probably would work a lot better nowadays with the attention span of a lot of people watching a movie.
Mm. Yeah, but I think as well, it's one of the. I think because it's perhaps one of the early key things that the film shows you, and I think it's one of the first you don't get to. They save Harry till the end, but I think before then, because I think the impact of Harry is the equivalent of Scrooge finding his own grave in Christmas Carol. The next one in chronological order, with the longest lasting kind of positive impact that he's had, is when he stopped Mr. Gower from accidentally poisoning the kid, and I think that's the first thing that's hammers home to George, okay, something weird is going on. Rather than the fact that the bar's changed and the owner's changed and that don't seem to recognise him. I think the fact that it's someone who he's ended up having a quite close relationship with, and then we've seen Mr. Gower kind of be into debt and kind of holds George in quite high regard for saving him from making a mistake and perhaps helping him.
And that no one knows that either as well, because they keep that between the two of them. Nobody ever finds out that in the actual story.
Good point. Yeah. So someone else, because I think it's the bartender who says it, and the way Jimmy Stewart's plays that quite well. Again, what? Yeah. How do you know? Yeah, I think that was quite well kind of seeded in and. Yeah, I didn't realize.
Yeah,
that.
he doesn't. It's on.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really clever and a lot of its nuances.
Yeah, I probably haven't given the film enough credit for. I think because I was assuming that the nuances of script writing perhaps wasn't available at this time, but yeah, more for me for not realizing that script writers were intelligent back in 1946.
And I think that's what's interesting about this film, because as I say, with it being a traditional film, the amount of people that will have watched this in the years, and none of us three are, and we're coming at it slightly different viewpoints in ourselves. But the conversation, obviously, there's certain things that are kind of coming out, which people go, oh, right, okay, I didn't know that. But a lot of people were going, oh, well, I see this every year. But it depends on how you view it and stuff. But definitely on a couple of watches or a couple of times I've seen it, there's certain elements that are jumping out at me now. But that's only because I've seen it, in spades. Where the first time around you probably won't pick this up. Maybe 2 or 3 times after watching it you will. Which in itself is great when you get rewatchability like that, and especially generally in a Christmas movie that you do have rewatchability in that regard. It's interesting that there is that nuance to it at all. So what do you think of the the kind of the gentrification? That's not even the right word for it, but the kind of like the
Potification.
Yeah, the potification of the town and how that's portrayed.
I think genuinely the shock of it being called Pottersville was really very good. I wasn't prepared for that, and Bedford Falls, a cute little name, just kind of suits the area, and it feels kind of working class warm, Bedford Falls. And then he's dead, or he's never existed, and it's called Pottersville. That's really good, and that was really shocking. And it really impressed me that it got me.
I've just realised, and you'll like this. Bedford Falls, no more.
Wow.
Wow. But also, but you know what it reminded me of, and I think it probably would have been a key influence of.
Go on.
Back to the Future 2.
Yeah, I was thinking that before. Yeah.
Back to the Future 2. Yeah. I don't. Hill Valley hasn't. I don't think Biff Tannen never changed the name of Hill Valley. I don't think, but it's got very much Pottersville vibes. Hill Valley does in number 2.
His reaction to all of the hokiness and not being recognised, I think I'd be pissed off. I think I'd be like, shut up, stop dicking me around. And it's done really well. I liked it. I think it finally got some pace in this kind of period. Not that I disliked its pace earlier, but it felt like it kind of like went down a hill for the last half an hour or so of the film. And it was. I don't know whether I expected to like this film, vaguely kind of Christmassy like this film or not, but it always had something for me that made me enjoy it.
I think the impact of it, and again, I think this is probably the first instance of this happening in cinema. I would say it was a book first, but I don't know. It's probably not many people who have read the book has probably seen this film. But I think, so like I probably imagine like the kind of intrigue and the audience reaction to this, like going, bloody hell, what's happening here? Perhaps the pacing of the first bit of the film is perhaps weighted a bit too much in the lead up to this, but I think it's just quite well done. It's all, I think it's all happening at night, so the cinematography, everything's a lot darker, as much as they can try and represent that in like in the time it was at. It kind of uses the same sets. I think the lighting's different. The way the characters are kind of shot are slightly. I think the camera angles are slightly different. I think I've got the impression that the camera's slightly higher than it has been for the majority of the film when they're in this kind of thing.
Yeah, so kind of like alluding to like the God kind of picture, but like at a different angle, kind of using that.
Yeah. This was also the same part. This was also the part when they realised that where I think it says Bert and I think George says Bert and Ernie in the same sentence, and that's the part where I went, wait, what?
Yeah,
I had to stop and rewind and go, I was like, wait, what? Bert and Ernie? And that's when I googled it. In fact, it's down as an urban legend in the Wikipedia article for this film. I've just noticed about Bert and Ernie. But I think that bit's all good. The bit that kind of I'm a bit iffy of, and I'll be interested to get Mark's opinion on this, is when he meets Mary, because Mary's suddenly an old spinster. And then he's like, and then he tries to chases her and like grabs her and tries to like kiss her and stuff, and that's kind of weird.
I think its heart's in the right place in as much as it's commentary on the idea of someone being the one. It's very old-fashioned kind of attitude towards love, that, you know, you only ever have one true love and stuff like that. I think it's generally quite a well-meaning thing, but you're right, he isn't particularly nice with her, but I don't think it goes too far. It's a bit yuck, but it could have been worse for the time, I think, actually.
True. Then again, though, in his mind, he's still his wife, but trying to grab something and stuff. But then, and again, this is someone who's pretty much been obsessed with him her entire life. So yeah, and I think, and that's one of probably the key facts, that if she doesn't recognise him, then whatever Clarence has done is there. True. It's just like the fact, but I just find it funny. So like that she's now, and again, I think it's Bert, the policeman, who says that she's an old spinster now. She's an old spinster or something.
Maid, I think.
She's about my age when she's this old spinster as well. You can get in to see, mate.
All she's got is hair tied back and big glasses. And that's all. It's basically it's she's all that. It's the she's all that. And or not another teen movie goes, oh no, she's got a ponytail and glasses.
Yeah, again, it's another trope, but I bet it wasn't a trope at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's visually striking. I mean, I think it's visually striking at the point, like where she's leaving the library with big massive glasses and everything.
I think this whole scene is basically a kind of like shoving right in your face what the themes were about the whole film. The idea of you don't know what you've got till it's gone. The idea of not understanding your true value. And the idea that it isn't actually about pleasing God. What life actually is it's about touching other people's lives. The good that you can do by being decent to other human beings. And I'm going to claim this as a humanist film. This isn't about God. The philosophy is humanist.
Yeah, so there are themes in this which I kind of really quite liked, and I'm going to use a quote from a piece of fiction art, and I need to blank the name of the character that's said in the dialogue, but there's a quote that's always stuck in my mind, which is representative of this piece of fiction, and I want to see if you can guess it. At the risk of overflating your ego, blank, you've done more. The lives you've touched others, and those lives others. You've done a lot of good, blank, and you can do a lot more. And that's from... Did you recognise the quote?
No.
I'm going to say that's from the final episode of Quantum Leap.
Yes, that's from Al the bartender. That's from Al the bartender. So, because the idea, particularly that episode as well, because that the final episode of Quantum Leap, it's
the first TV show ending I ever cried at.
Yeah, and Quantum Leap is one of my top 5 TV shows of all time. And
which will be on We Made This after Shipwrecked and Comatose finishes in 2422.
Yeah. So I think the kind of theme of Quantum Leap, and particularly that episode, kind of, for lack of a better term, quantifies the idea that Sam Beckett is a force for good, and that he doesn't realise that the impact that he has done. It's not just changing the lives of one person, but and for someone else we're probably going to talk about in a second, the fact that he's changed or saved people, those people will then have impacts and ripples throughout time, which will cause a cascading consequence of good things to happen. And good things to happen. And I think that's what the film does. And there's this kind of like almost Quantum Leap-esque thing to this, but slash with Touched by an Angel, and that's a theme, and that's the kind of that's one of the main reasons I quite like the kind of message behind Quantum Leap, and I think that this is kind of has a very similar message, so I quite like that aspect of the film to show that yes, but you don't realise that every action that you've done is going to have impacts. And we've not gotten to Harry again, but he's the prime example of what happens if you're there, and the one thing you did many years ago means that a bunch of people can go and live lives and do their own thing that will impact other people. And anytime anything that reminds me of that aspect of Quantum Leap, I'll automatically love.
Yep. And of course that will come back because, you know, Mary has done the thing like we mentioned before, and everyone brings in the money. And then we also find out from abroad, £25,000 as well, that kind of everything.
That's like, from his friend Sam, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that because they built the factory in Bedford Falls, they've got people working for it, and I think it's the kickstarting of Sam being able to basically become a successful businessman. So that's okay. So that's another thing that George. Okay, yeah.
Okay, layers upon layers.
Yeah,
Mark, layers upon layers.
It's gently unfortunate 75 years on that the whole premise of the film and the whole kind of solution is plastic, considering how controversial plastic is environmentally these days. But yeah, moving on from that, I think it's I do think it's really the fact that they don't really waste any of George's kindness, and it all comes back almost karmically for him. I think, yeah, it's a very clever film, actually.
I think the one thing that we haven't kind of mentioned is the big kind of, or delved on a bit too much, is the fact that I think his brother Harry saved a whole ship of, a whole battle cruiser of people who died, which I think was the key, which is the kind of the key climax, I think, which makes George realise his worth when he sees his brother's grave.
Yeah, because without what he did, then that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he became the hero, but you need that, you know, that seed to actually be able for it to transpire in that way. I also think that, going back to our conversation earlier as well, it's just something that just came into my mind, is when we said, like, they could have intervened at any time, but he wouldn't have learnt this lesson. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that, it's that lesson of he was at his lowest ebb, and we find him at his lowest ebb, but we actually see the highest kind of reveal on it. So I think, you know, going back to Clarence's thing, that I think the intervention had to happen then for him to realise, because if it happened before, you might not have had that realisation, because he isn't at his lowest ebb. He might have just, you know, pushed it off and things like that. So from that non-linear time, I think the intervention had to be at that moment of crisis, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
The Adventures of Tom Sawyer was in there as well, in the book, and as I say about the Clarence thing. So I didn't really get your opinion on the Clarence story, actually, Mark, because as I say, the friendship thing, it seemed a little bit for me forced. I know it was a lovely touch, but what are your opinion on it? Do you think it was a bit forced or not?
I think it was a friendship of circumstance. I didn't have an issue with it. You do have these kind of like friends for 5 minutes in life, don't you? Where you become very close to someone for a certain thing that you're doing that they also happen to be doing, and then you never see them again. But you have fond memories of them. So, no, I don't think I had a problem with it at all, actually.
Yeah, that's all I've got. Matt, anything you want to bring up?
The only thing I kind of want to bring up is that in 2014 there was there's a kind of group. They're not together anymore. They were called the Retrospective Soundtrack Players. Their third album was called It's a Wonderful Christmas Carol, and it's basically a concept album soundtracking both the Christmas Carol and this film. So for example, they've got songs called It's a Wonderful Life, The Guardian Angel, Every Time a Bell Rings, an Angel Gets His Wings, and the album closes with a song called No Man Is Poor Who Has Friends. It's a really good Christmas album, and I do recommend it. I want to quickly share that they also had 2 other albums. 2011, their debut album was called Cool Hand Luke, which is based on the film Cool Hand Luke. And the second album is called Catcher in the Rye, which is just basically songs about the book. And I've never read the book, but the album's great.
Great stuff.
But,
well, that calls the end of this special 100th and Christmas-themed episode. Mark, thank you for deciding to do this.
100 fucking episodes. It still
100 episodes.
Just feels so ridiculous that something that I did when I was bored in lockdown has kind of like achieved this. And I just want to say thank you to everybody that's listened to 1, 2, all of the episodes. If you've listened to all of the episodes, you're equal parts batshit and brilliant, thank you. And we ain't going anywhere. This isn't, but there's still 100 more episodes to do. I've got so many stupid special ideas. There's loads of episodes of Red Dwarf to go. We've got to think of something for next fucking Christmas. So, ideas on a postcard. But yeah, what a brilliant way to celebrate Christmas with 100 fucking episodes of Shipwrecked and Comatose.
It's a little bit different to last year's Christmas episode, though, isn't it? Just a little bit.
Well, you were here to rein us in, and I actually think this is longer than last year's Christmas episode.
Oh, it will be.
Oh, hang on. Sorry, talking about that, I've just got a text message from Hob. Where are you?
Sod off.
I don't know what that's about.
Go away, Hob. Nobody loves you.
Yeah, just wait until the Hobcast starts, and you're never invited as a guest.
I don't want to be on the Hobcast.
If you want a Hobcast, please ask Mark to Google where is the Hobcast. Hashtag Hobcast. Hashtag Hobcast.
Hashtag Sod offcast.
Sodcast.
Yes, I would say the same. In this theme of people that you meet and stuff like that. We've got a great bunch of people here, and
and Matt.
And Matt.
Wow,
and,
the self-deprecation is strong today, Matt. We do love
What more is there to say? Well, what more is there to say other than Merry Christmas?
I mean, not
Happy
listen to
Christmas.
this.
And if you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you still enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Season's greetings.
Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year and all those shiny things.
Or in other words,
fuck off, Sinatra.
We miss you, Colin and Carl. Hello? Anyone? Hi. This is Hob. I was told to come to this warehouse. I'm here for the Christmas special. I'm ready to go. I'm a massive fan of Frank Capra. I really haven't watched It's a Wonderful Life for a long time, and I'm really looking forward to. Where is everyone? Hey! Oh, there you are. I mean, I was so worried. I mean, I thought I was losing my mind. I thought someone had sent me to the wrong address. I mean, hey, what's that thing you're holding?
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This Podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.
Ho, 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 we made this.
Welcome to the third age of podcasting.
The name of the podcast
is A Dream Given Form,
a show about J. Michael Straczynski's Babylon 5
for the We Made This Podcast Network.
Join us in 2022 as we look back at themes and ideas from across the show's history.
Today we're going to be discussing the three prominent leaders of Babylon 5. Sinclair, Sheridan and Delenn.
Everything from Earth and the Shadows and Mumbai all the way through from early days of Season 1 all the way through to the Interstellar Alliance, and it's their legacy. Interstellar Alliance is really the legacy of these three characters. We are kind of going to potentially some scary territory here, looking at the parallels between Earth Force and Babylon 5 and the real world in which we live in now.
It is a really insidious way of doing things, and the more I think about it and the more I watch that scene, and the way that Pierce speaks and talks about it really just fills me with chills, because, you know, our politicians do this all the time. They talk like this all the time, and they hide their true intention behind false promises. Current situation with the potential reboot of Babylon 5 for the CW network.
He's been involved in comic writing, he's been for Spider-Man, he's done shows like Sense8, which is very progressive as well. He's going to bring all that experience into the project, so I think it's going to be a very different show.
And even some special guests too. Lita herself, Patricia Tallman.
I love hearing that people are still interested in Babylon 5, and, you know, it's really an honor to continue the conversation around a show that meant so much to us. And, you know, it's the little show that could.
Yeah. And then in 2023, join us for the 30th anniversary of Babylon 5 as we start fortnightly look-backs at The Gathering Season 1 and beyond.
So, join us for A Dream Given Form.
Our last best hope for peace.